The house at 4819 Hargrove Lane cost us everything we had, and about $40,000 we didn't. I'm not being dramatic. Theo and I spent 3 years saving for a down payment, eating rice and lentils 4 nights a week, keeping the apartment at 60 degrees through 2 Ohio winters, because the gas bill was the one line item we could actually control. When the listing appeared on Zillow at 60,000 below comps, we drove out that same afternoon. The realtor was still setting up her open house signs when we pulled into the driveway. I remember Theo killing the engine, and both of us just sitting there staring through the windshield at it. "That's our house," he said. He was right. I knew it the way you know certain things. Not with logic, but with the part of your chest that tightens when something fits. A 1967 split level with original hardwood floors, an updated kitchen with butcher block countertops, and a big backyard that sloped down to a tree line of old-growth oaks, 4 bedrooms, which was one more than we needed, and exactly right for what we were planning. We'd been talking about kids for a year. Not in the abstract anymore, in the way where you start tracking cycles and reading about prenatal vitamins and arguing about whether Oliver is a real name or a cat name. The realtor, a woman named Paula Egan with aggressive blonde highlights and a handshake like a hydraulic press, was waiting on the front porch when we walked up. She told us the price before we asked, $310, she said, which, yes, is low for Hargrove. The seller is motivated. Why? Theo asked. Because Theo always asks why. He's a software engineer. His whole life is asking a machine why it did what it did, and getting a useful answer. Estate sale. The previous owner passed away in the home. Ohio disclosure law requires us to tell you that up front. How did she die? I asked. Because I always ask how. I'm a graphic designer. My whole life is looking at something and asking what's wrong with it. Paula paused. Professional pause. Practiced. Natural causes. She was 79. Passed in her sleep in the master bedroom. She lived here alone for 31 years. Her name was Elise Falk. 31 years alone in a 4-bedroom house. I thought about that later, but at the time, I was thinking about the bay window in the living room and how the afternoon light came through it like something from a cathedral. I was thinking about the backyard, the way the grass was thick and soft, and the greenhouse Elise had built from reclaimed window frames and corrugated plastic, now empty and furred with moss. We made an offer that night. Full asking, no contingencies except inspection. Theo ran the numbers on his spreadsheet 3 times. We'd be house poor for at least 2 years. No vacations, no new car, no eating out. Every dollar committed to the mortgage and a renovation budget that was already too small. The estate accepted in 14 hours. The closing took 45 days. And on a bright, cold Saturday in March, we moved in. The first thing I noticed was how much Elise Falk had left behind. Not the big stuff. The estate sale had cleared the furniture, the dishes, the clothing. But a house holds more than objects. It holds decisions. The wallpaper Elise had chosen for the hallway was a faded botanical print. Tiny violets and ferns repeating in vertical columns, yellowed at the edges where sunlight had reached it over 3 decades. The shelves she'd built into the master bedroom closet were fitted with watchmaker's precision to dimensions that no longer mattered. The exact width of her shoeboxes. The exact height of her folded sweaters. The garden beds in the backyard, dormant under late winter mulch, were arranged in a pattern I could tell was deliberate, but couldn't decode. And the modifications, I didn't notice them right away. The first 3 days were chaos, boxes everywhere. Theo on his hands and knees behind the dryer trying to connect a vent hose. Me standing in the kitchen holding a colander and a cutting board and having no idea which cabinet to put either one in, because every cabinet felt like it belonged to Elise. You don't think about the bones of a house when you're drowning in cardboard and takeout containers and the low-grade panic of having spent every cent you own on a building. You've been inside exactly 4 times. But on the 4th day, a Tuesday, Theo went back to work. I was supposed to be finishing a logo redesign for a craft brewery in Portland, but I'd gotten distracted by the hallway wallpaper. One edge was peeling near the bathroom door, and I started pulling at it, and then I couldn't stop. There's something deeply satisfying about stripping wallpaper. The long, slow peel of adhesive releasing its grip. The revelation of what's underneath. I pulled the wallpaper off in strips, expecting bare drywall. What I found was drywall, yes, but wrong. The wall was too thick. I noticed it at the door frame, where the original trim had been removed during the estate sale staging and not replaced. A standard interior wall in a residential home is about 4.5 inches, 2 sheets of drywall on either side of a 3.5-inch stud. I held my tape measure to the exposed edge, 8.25 inches. I went through the house measuring. Not every wall was thick. The downstairs walls were standard, but upstairs, the walls around the hallway, the ones separating the bedrooms from each other and from the corridor, were all oversized. 8 inches, 8.25, and one spot between the bathroom and the bedroom at the end of the hall, nearly 9 inches. Soundproofing. Theo said that evening, scrolling through his phone while I showed him the measurements I'd written on the back of a takeout receipt. Extra insulation. She was old. She lived alone. Maybe she was sensitive to noise. Soundproofing between rooms in a house where she was the only person? Maybe she had a TV in one room and wanted quiet in another? All of them, Theo? Every wall? He looked at me over his phone. Maya. We bought a house from a dead 79-year-old woman. Old people do weird things to their houses. My grandmother had 6 locks on her front door and she lived in a gated community. I let it go, not because he was right, but because I didn't have a better explanation, and arguing about wall thickness felt like a strange way to spend our first week in our dream house. The locks were the next thing. Every interior door in the house had one, not the push-button privacy knobs you see in residential construction. Keyed deadbolts, heavy, commercial grade. The kind you'd put on an exterior door in a neighborhood you didn't trust. Bedrooms, closets, the basement door, the bathroom, every single one. I found the key ring on a nail inside the kitchen cabinet, behind the spice rack shelf. 11 keys, each one labeled with a room in Elise's small, deliberate handwriting. Master, bath, 2, hall, closet, basement, nursery. The room at the end of the upstairs hall, the one Paula had called the bonus room, was labeled nursery on Elise's keyring. During the open house, that room had been staged with a small desk, a bookshelf with fake books, and a generic landscape print leaning against the wall. Normal staging, but the staging furniture was gone now, rented and returned, and the room was bare, and bare. It was strange. The walls were painted a soft, faded yellow, not the builder's eggshell white that covered every other room. The window had blackout curtains on a heavy-duty rod, the fabric thick enough to block every photon of light. There was a white noise machine hardwired into the wall near the baseboard. Not a consumer model sitting on a shelf, but wired directly into the house's electrical system, with a small dial that controlled volume and a switch that controlled tone. Someone had installed it like a permanent fixture. And when I pulled up the carpet in the corner to check the hardwood underneath, because refinishing the floors was item number 4 on our renovation list, there was no hardwood. The subfloor was poured concrete, smooth and level, with a drain set into the center, covered by a metal grate. A drain, in a second-floor bedroom with a concrete floor, blackout curtains, a hardwired white noise machine, and a lock on the outside of the door. I stood in the center of that room for a long time. The afternoon light filtered through the blackout curtains as a dull brown glow that made the air feel thick. I could hear the house settling around me, the tick of cooling pipes, the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and underneath those sounds. Or maybe just in my imagination, something else, a quality of silence that felt like listening. Theo looked at the room with me that night. I showed him the concrete, the drain, the hardwired white noise machine. He was quiet, which was unusual. Theo fills silence the way some people fill empty shelves, compulsively because the emptiness makes him nervous. Could be a dark room, he said finally. Photography. You need drainage for chemical processing. The drain line would have to run from the second floor, through the first floor ceiling, through the walls, down into the main sewer connection in the basement. That's thousands of dollars of custom plumbing for photography. People are serious about their hobbies. Theo, what do you want me to say, Maya? I wanted him to say what I was thinking. I wanted him not to make me be the one who said it. A room with a concrete floor and a drain and blackout curtains and a lock on the outside of the door. In a house where a woman lived alone for 31 years. I wanted him to say the words so I wouldn't have to carry them alone. He didn't. We added the room to the renovation list and went to bed. The growth chart changed things. I found it 9 days after we moved in, on a Saturday, while measuring the closet in the yellow room for shelving. The closet was deep and narrow, and when I opened the door all the way, the back of the door was covered in pencil marks, small, precise horizontal lines, each one annotated with a date in Elise's handwriting, height marks, the kind parents make on a doorframe to track a child growing up. The earliest mark was dated September 14th, 1996, 2 feet, 3 inches, a toddler's height. The marks climbed upward through the years, faster in the early ones, then slowing as growth slows. Through the late 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, dozens and dozens of marks, some only weeks apart, each one dated and precise. The most recent mark was dated March 3, 2023, 5 feet, 1 inch. 7 months before Elise died. 27 years of growth. 27 years of someone standing against this door, while Elise held a pencil to the top of their head and drew a line and wrote the date. I had already checked. The estate filing was public record, available through the Franklin County Probate Court website. Elise Marianne Falk, deceased October 11, 2023. No surviving spouse, no surviving children, no known heirs. Estate administered by Hollowell Grant, a law firm in downtown Columbus. No family at the memorial service. The funeral home confirmed this when I called. Elise Falk had no children. She had never married. She had no nieces or nephews. She had, according to every record available, lived entirely alone for 31 years. But someone in that house had grown from 2 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 1, and Elise had measured every inch of it. I took photos of the growth chart. I showed Theo. I showed him the dates, the progression, the handwriting. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my phone screen for a long time. Maybe she was a foster parent, he said, informal, off the books. For 27 years, the same child off the books. Maya, what do you want to do? We can't unbuy the house. He was right about that. We couldn't unbuy it. We couldn't afford to sell it. We'd lose the closing costs, the inspection fees, the first month's mortgage. We were in this house the way a nail is in wood. You can pull it out, but not without damage. So I stopped talking about it, but I didn't stop thinking, and 2 nights later, the sound started. Thursday, 2:40 a.m. I know because I checked my phone. I'm a light sleeper, always have been. Worse since the move, worse since the yellow room. Theo sleeps like a man with a clear conscience and no imagination, which is to say he sleeps deeply and without interruption. Footsteps, not the house settling, not pipes, not the refrigerator cycling. Footsteps, rhythmic, deliberate, soft. Someone walking carefully, someone who knew which floorboards creaked and was avoiding them, above us in the upstairs hallway. I lay in bed and listened. The footsteps traveled the length of the hall, maybe 25 feet, paused, then returned, pacing back and forth in a steady, unhurried rhythm. 11 minutes, I timed it. Then the footsteps stopped, and I heard a different sound, a soft scraping, like something sliding through a tight space, like a body compressing itself into a gap that shouldn't fit a body. Then silence in the morning. I checked the upstairs, nothing. No marks on the floor, no displaced dust, every door closed, every room empty. I checked the attic hatch, latched from the inside, undisturbed. Raccoons, Theo said. Squirrels. I'll check the eaves this weekend for entry points. He checked. There were no entry points. The eaves were solid, the attic insulation undisturbed, the soffit vents screened and intact. No animal droppings, no nesting material, no chew marks. The sounds came back that night, and the next, always between 2 and 4 a.m. Always the same pattern. Footsteps in the hallway, steady pacing, then the scraping sound, then silence. On the 4th night, I got up. I didn't turn on the lights. I stood at the bottom of the stairs in my bare feet and looked up into the hallway, which was dark except for the faint glow of a streetlight coming through the bathroom window. I could hear the footsteps clearly right there, right above me, soft and careful on the hardwood. I went up. The hallway was empty. I was standing in an empty hallway, hearing footsteps that were right in front of me, right there, and there was nothing. No one. The sound was coming from inside the walls, not echoing off them, originating within them. The footsteps moved away from me, toward the yellow room at the end of the hall, and I followed, because I'm the kind of person who follows, and I opened the door to the yellow room. Empty. The blackout curtains were drawn. The air had a stale quality, like it hadn't circulated in days. Even though I'd opened the window that morning, the white noise machine was off. I was sure I'd left it off, but there was a faint hum coming from somewhere, low and steady, at the edge of hearing. I stood in the doorway and felt something I hadn't felt since I was a child. Afraid of the dark, the absolute bone-deep certainty that I was not alone. That something was in the room with me, close enough to touch, watching me with an attention that was total and patient and intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. I turned on the light. The overhead fixture buzzed and flickered to life. The room was empty. Concrete floor, drain, bare walls, closed curtains. But on the floor, near the closet, near the growth chart, there was a footprint. A single bare footprint in the fine layer of dust that I had not yet cleaned from the concrete. Small, a woman's foot, or a teenager's 5 toes. The arch clearly defined, fresh. Because I'd swept this floor 3 days ago. I locked the door from the outside with Elise's key. I went back to bed. I did not sleep. The next morning, I called our neighbor. Donna Donovan lived in the split level immediately south of ours. A house so similar to 4819 that they'd clearly been built by the same developer in the same year. Mrs. Donovan was mid-60s, retired elementary school teacher. The kind of woman who brought banana bread on moving day and checked your recycling technique. She'd been stopping by almost daily since we moved in, always with the same question, asked with the same careful casualness. Everything alright in the house? Nothing unexpected? She came over for coffee. I showed her the footprint. I told her about the sounds. Mrs. Donovan set her mug down on the kitchen counter. She looked at the photo of the footprint on my phone, then at me, and something in her face shifted. Not surprise. Something older and heavier, recognition. Elise's ward, she said. I waited. That's what she called her, her ward. I never knew the girl's name. I'm not sure Elise ever told anyone. Mrs. Donovan spoke slowly, testing each word before releasing it. Elise had someone living with her. Not a relative, not a partner. A girl, a young person. She'd been with Elise since she was very small. Since 1996, I said. That sounds right. I moved to Hargrove in 2001, and the girl was already here then. Small, maybe 5 or 6. I only saw her a handful of times, always from a distance, always early morning or late evening, never in full daylight. She was. Mrs. Donovan paused, looking for a word that wouldn't come. She was different. The way she moved, quick, like an animal that's used to being startled. Elise was always with her, always between her and the world. Did anyone report it? Mrs. Donovan's jaw tightened. Report what, a woman raising a child in her home? She fed her, clothed her, loved her. You could see it in the way Elise talked about her, the few times she talked at all. What was I supposed to report? That the child didn't go to school? That she was shy? Half the kids on this street were homeschooled. She wasn't homeschooled, Mrs. Donovan. She was hidden. There's no birth certificate, no school record, no medical history, nothing. I know. She said it quietly. I've known for a long time. We all have. The Chens on the other side, the Morrisons across the street. We all saw enough to understand that Elise was keeping someone. And we all decided it wasn't our business, because Elise was kind and careful, and whatever she was doing, the girl seemed safe. She picked up her mug, set it down again. When Elise died, I checked the house. I let myself in. Elise had given me a key years ago for emergencies. The girl wasn't here. The passages were empty. I assumed she'd left. Passages. Mrs. Donovan looked at me steadily. You haven't found them yet. She told me where to look. Behind the closet in the master bedroom, there was a panel, not hidden exactly, but flush with the wall and painted to match. I found it that afternoon. It lifted out with a firm pull, revealing a gap in the wall about 18 inches wide and 5 feet tall. A passage running between the studs of the thickened walls. Through the extra insulation Theo had dismissed as soundproofing. It extended the full length of the upstairs hallway, with access points behind closets in 3 of the 4 bedrooms, vertical access, a shaft, really lined with wooden cleats like a ladder, dropped down through what looked like an oversized icked-back chase into the basement. A network, a system of narrow paths built into the skeleton of the house, allowing a small person to move from room to room, floor to floor, without ever entering the rooms themselves. I called the police. Officer Reeves and Officer Tran were professional, thorough, and visibly unsettled. They brought a K9 unit. The dog alerted immediately in the upstairs hallway, scratching at the wall and whining. The officers checked the passages with flashlights and body cameras. Inside, they found evidence of long-term habitation. A thin mattress rolled and stowed, bottles of water, some empty, some full canned food. Several cans recently opened, the lids peeled back with a manual opener, a flashlight, a toothbrush, its bristles flattened with use, children's books, their spines cracked and softened from being read hundreds of times, and on the wooden studs, scratched into the grain with something sharp, thousands of small marks grouped in sets of 5, tally marks. I tried to count a section and gave up after 300. The forensics team came. They took DNA samples, fingerprints, photographs. The passage walls were polished smooth in places, worn down by the repeated passage of a body over years. The air inside smelled like a person, not unwashed exactly, but human in a way that was unmistakable, like opening a bedroom door in the morning before the window's been cracked. They didn't find anyone. The house was empty. Whoever had been using the passages was gone. Detective Paul Holt took over the case. He was a tired man with a careful voice who sat at our kitchen table and told us what he thought had happened. Subject lived in the concealed spaces for an extended period. Likely the same individual referenced by your neighbor. When police entered the home, she exited through the basement access point, which connects to an old coal chute that opens near the tree line. She's in the wind. Will you find her? I asked. We'll try. But these cases, long-term confinement, institutionalized behavior, the subjects are unpredictable. She knows how to hide. She's been doing it her whole life. They searched the woods behind the house. They canvassed the neighborhood, the shelters, the hospitals, the bus station on East Broad. They put out a bulletin. Nothing. The passages were sealed with plywood, warning tape, evidence tags. Theo and I were left in a house that felt, for the first time since we'd moved in, genuinely empty. The sounds stopped, the footprints stopped. The air in the yellow room lost its stale quality and smelled like paint and concrete and nothing else. It's over, Theo said. He squeezed my hand. His relief was so large and so genuine that I felt guilty for not sharing it fully. For 3 weeks I believed him. I went back to work, I finished the brewery logo. I took on 2 new clients, a dentist's office rebrand and a wedding invitation suite. Theo replaced the kitchen faucet, fixed the running toilet upstairs, and spent a weekend recalking the master bathroom. We cooked together. We watched TV. We talked about paint colors and curtain rods and whether the backyard had enough sun for tomatoes. Normal things. Dream house things. I stopped sleeping with the lights on. I stopped checking the hallway at 3 a.m. I stopped listening. And then on a Wednesday night, I woke up because someone was standing in our bedroom. Not in the hallway, not in the passage, in the room, standing beside the bed, 3 feet from my face, close enough that I could hear breathing. That was not Theo's, shallow, controlled, nearly silent, a figure, small, thin, absolutely motionless, standing in the dark with the quality of someone who had been standing there for a long time and was prepared to stand there for much longer. Patient, practiced, waiting. I didn't scream. The terror was so complete and so total that it bypassed the part of my brain that produces screaming and went straight to a deeper, older place. The place where your body decides between running and freezing. And mine froze. I lay there. I looked at the figure. The figure looked at me in the dark. I could see only the outline. small, barely over 5 feet, thin to the point of angularity, hair hanging past the shoulders in matted ropes, barefoot, hands at the sides, fingers slightly curled. And it was a she I knew immediately, with the certainty of recognition, was wearing something light-colored, a shirt oversized hanging to mid-thigh. She didn't move. She didn't make a sound beyond that shallow breathing. She just stood and watched me with an attention I could feel on my skin, like pressure, like being held underwater. I reached for my phone, slowly. My fingers found it on the nightstand, and I pressed the side button, and the screen lit up with a wash of blue-white light that filled the room for 3 seconds. I saw her face, young, mid-20s, pale, not naturally fair, but pale in the way of someone who has spent years without consistent sunlight. A mineral pallor that made her look carved rather than born. Her features were fine, almost delicate, but stretched tight over the bones with a leanness that went past thin into something structural, as if her body had pared itself down to only what was necessary for survival. Her eyes were large and dark and open, and fixed on mine with an expression I couldn't read. Not threatening, not pleading, not blank. Something else, something I didn't have a word for until much later. The phone screen dimmed. In the half-second before darkness returned, she moved. Not the way people move. Not the sequential contraction of muscles, the shift of weight, the visible intention that precedes human motion. She moved the way water moves when you tilt a glass. A single, fluid, continuous shift from beside my bed to the bedroom doorway. She was here, and then she was there, and the space between contained no steps, no sound, no transition, just displacement. I heard the scraping sound, the body in the walls sound, then nothing. I turned on every light in the house. I woke Theo. I called 911. The police came, different officers this time, but the same careful search. They checked the sealed passages. The plywood was undisturbed. The evidence tape unbroken. She hadn't used the passages, she'd found another way. Or she'd never left at all. And the passages were just one part of a network that went deeper into the house than anyone had mapped. They found nothing. They left. Theo fell asleep on the couch with the lights on, and I sat in the kitchen as the sky lightened outside the window, and I noticed that 3 cans of soup were missing from the pantry. A box of crackers had been opened and resealed, the flap tucked in with a precision that suggested it was meant to look untouched. And on the counter, placed at the exact spot where I set my coffee mug every morning, there was a small piece of paper. It was a page torn from a children's picture book, one of the books the police had cataloged but not collected from the passages. The illustration showed a rabbit hiding inside a hollow log, peering out at a fox passing by without noticing. Simple, soft watercolor. On the margin, in small, careful handwriting, not Elise's cramped cursive, but something else, blockish and deliberate, like a person who learned to write without a teacher. Someone had written, "Please don't tell them. She said you would come." I sat with that piece of paper for an hour. The coffee grew cold in my hand. The house settled into its daytime quiet. The refrigerator humming, the furnace ticking, the oak tree in the backyard tapping one branch against the gutter in the wind. She said you would come. Not someone you. Elise had told this person, this woman who had grown from 2 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 1 inside the walls of my house, that someone specific would come, that the next person to live here would be safe. I should have called Detective Holt. I should have handed over the note, reported the missing food, told him she was still in the house, that the sealed passages were irrelevant because she knew this house better than anyone alive. I should have done the right thing. Instead, I put a can of soup on the counter. I added a spoon, a bowl, and a bottle of water. Then I went to bed. In the morning, the soup was gone. The bowl and spoon had been washed and placed in the cabinet. Not the right cabinet. The bowl was with the plates and the spoon was with the spatulas, but washed and put away. And the effort of that, the attempt at normalcy by someone who had never lived in a room with, cabinets broke something in me that I didn't know could break. I started leaving food every night. I didn't tell Theo. After 4 days, I started leaving notes. Simple ones. "My name is Maya. I won't hurt you. You can stay." I left a pen. She wrote back. 1 word, "Okay." 2 days later, "Thank you." 3 days after that, she said you would be kind. She said the house chooses kind people. I wrote, "What's your name?" The answer came on the back of another torn book page, a picture of a bird on a windowsill. She called me Lark. The notes became a conversation. Slow, spanning weeks. Each exchange separated by the cycle of night and day. I wrote in the evening. She answered by morning. She wrote carefully with effort in that blocky, self-taught handwriting, but her thoughts were clear and sometimes precise in a way that surprised me. She wasn't uneducated. She was differently educated. Elise had taught her to read with the picture books in the passages. She'd graduated to Elise's own collection. Biology textbooks, field guides, reference manuals. She knew the Latin names of every tree in the backyard. She could identify birds by their calls. She understood photosynthesis and cellular respiration and the water cycle. She understood almost nothing about people. She told me about Elise piece by piece in fragments scattered across dozens of notes. Elise found her in 1996. Lark didn't know where she came from before that. Her earliest memory was the house, specifically the yellow room. The warmth of the concrete floor in winter when the heating pipes ran underneath it. The sound of Elise's voice reading through the door. Elise told her she'd been left on the porch. But Lark suspected this wasn't true, because Elise always looked away when she said it. Elise kept her hidden, not with cruelty. Lark was emphatic about this, but with the systematic, methodical care of a scientist managing a variable. Elise had been a biologist. She'd taught at Ohio State for 20 years before a professional dispute. Lark didn't know the details, ended her academic career. She approached Lark's care like a research problem. The concrete floor because Lark couldn't tolerate the texture of wood grain. The drain because she couldn't be toilet trained until she was nearly 7. The white noise machine because silence terrified her. The blackout curtains because direct sunlight caused migraines. As Lark grew, she moved into the walls, not because Elise put her there, because Lark felt safer in enclosed spaces. The tighter the space, the calmer she felt. Open rooms were overwhelming, too much light, too much air, too many directions from which something could approach. The walls were finite, knowable, safe. Elise built the passages to accommodate this, widening the walls, adding the insulation for sound dampening, installing the access panel so Lark could move freely without being forced into the open. Elise read to her every night, sat in the hallway with her back against the wall and read aloud for an hour, sometimes 2, while Lark sat on the other side of the drywall and listened. They talked through the walls about the garden, about birds, about weather, about the books Elise was reading. Once a week, early morning before dawn, Elise would take Lark into the backyard, just for a few minutes, just to feel grass and air and the open sky. Lark tolerated these trips the way a phobic person tolerates an elevator with controlled terror and enormous trust in the person beside her. This was their life, 27 years of it. I read Lark's notes and I understood 2 things simultaneously. The first was that what Elise did was monstrous. She kept a human being hidden from the world for nearly 3 decades. No medical care beyond what Elise could provide herself. No formal education. No socialization beyond one aging woman who talked through walls. Whatever chance Lark might have had at a normal life, at friends, at the world, Elise took it from her. The second thing I understood was that Elise had been trapped too. By the time Lark was 5, 6, 7, her needs were so specific and her terror so absolute that any intervention, foster care, hospitalization, institutional treatment would have shattered her. Elise had created a dependency so complete that breaking it would break its subject. She couldn't reveal Lark without destroying her. She couldn't walk away without abandoning her. So she did what people do when every exit is a wall. She stayed. And she built the cage as comfortable as she could, and she called it love. Because what else could she call it? I understood this because I was doing the same thing. The food I left every night. The thermostat I adjusted to 64 degrees because Lark wrote that she was cold. The white noise machine I turned on in the yellow room because she said it helped her sleep. The hallway light I dimmed after 8 p.m. so she could move more comfortably through whatever paths she'd found beyond these sealed passages. Each adjustment was small. Each one was kind. Each one was a concession to a world organized around Lark's needs instead of mine. The night I saw her for the second time was nothing like the first. I'd been leaving notes for 3 weeks. I knew her schedule as she emerged between 2 and 4 a.m., moved through the house in a specific order, took what she needed, retreated. I knew she was afraid of glass breaking, sudden voices, the sound of the dishwasher. I knew she hummed when she was calm, a single melody, always the same, 4 notes rising and falling in a pattern that didn't match any song I recognized. I stayed up. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark with no phone, no light, nothing. I waited. At 2:47, I heard her. The scraping sound fainter now, coming from somewhere in the basement, then bare feet on the stairs, light and precise. She came into the kitchen and went to the counter where I'd left her food. She knew I was there. I saw her pause, a slight stiffening, a fractional turn of the head, but she didn't run. She took the food. She ate standing at the counter, quickly and efficiently, the way someone eats who has never associated meals with leisure. She drank the water, then she turned. In the faint light from the street lamp outside the kitchen window, I saw her clearly, small, bird-like. Her arms were thin, but wired with lean muscle from years of climbing through tight spaces. Her feet were bare and calloused, the soles thickened into something almost like leather. Her hair was long and matted. She wore a faded t-shirt that reached her knees, one of Elise's, probably washed so many times the original color was a guess. She looked at me, I looked at her. The kitchen was very quiet. Then she sat down. Not at the table. The table was too open, too exposed, too much like a room. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet under the sink and looked up at me with an expression I finally had a word for. Hope. Terrified. Fragile. Shaking. Leave hope. The hope of something that has been alone in the dark for a very long time and has found a person and doesn't know yet if the person is safe. I slid off my chair and sat on the floor across from her, 5 feet apart. Not reaching, not approaching, just present. We sat there for an hour. She watched me. I watched her. Neither of us spoke. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street outside, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling. Lark flinched at the light but didn't run. When the car was gone and the kitchen was dark again, she let out a breath I think she'd been holding since she sat down. When she left, she paused at the basement doorway and raised one hand. A small wave, tentative, performed with the conscious awkwardness of someone reproducing a gesture she'd only seen in illustrations. I waved back. She disappeared into the basement stairwell with that fluid, too fast motion. And I sat on the kitchen floor and put my face in my hands and felt something enormous and irreversible settle onto my shoulders. The kitchen floor became our meeting place. Every night, between 2 and 4 a.m., Lark emerged and I was there. The distance between us shrank over weeks. 5 feet, 4, 3. She never spoke aloud, but she hummed sometimes, that 4-note melody. I learned it. I hummed it with her, and when I did, she would close her eyes and lean her head back against the cabinet, and her face would go slack with a peace so complete that it physically hurt to witness. One night she touched my hand, a brush of fingertips against my knuckles, light as a breath. She pulled back instantly, as if testing whether contact would burn. When it didn't, she reached again. She held my hand for 15 seconds, her grip tight and trembling, and then let go and retreated to the walls. The next night, she held on for a minute, then 5. Then she fell asleep holding my hand, her head tipped sideways, her breathing deep and even. And I sat on the cold tile floor and did not move for 2 hours because I would rather have lost a feeling in both legs than wake her. I didn't tell Theo. He slept through every night. And in the mornings I smiled and made coffee and talked about the renovation and the dentist's office rebrand and whether we should seed the lawn in April or wait until fall, and none of it was real. My real life happened on the kitchen floor at 3 a.m. Theo found out on a Sunday. He came home early from a hardware store run because they were out of the grout he needed. I was in the kitchen with Lark at 10 a.m. in daylight. Lark was sitting at the table, in a chair, in the sun, eating cereal from a bowl with a spoon. The morning light was coming through the window and landing on her arm, and she was tolerating it. her face tight with effort but her body still, and I was standing at the counter watching her with my heart so full, I thought it would crack a rib. Theo came through the front door and walked into the kitchen and stopped. Lark screamed, not a word, not a shriek, a sound from below the throat, raw and ancient. The sound of a cornered animal that has never learned to ask for help, because help was never a concept available to it. She knocked the chair backward and was off it, and across the kitchen and into the basement stairwell before the chair hit the floor. That impossible speed, that liquid, jointless motion. Theo stood in the kitchen doorway. He looked at the overturned chair, had the cereal bowl on the table, still full milk pooling on the placemat at me. Maya, he said. What was that? I told him everything. He listened. He sat at the kitchen table in the same chair Lark had been sitting in, and he listened to the whole thing. The notes, the food, the nightly meetings, Lark's name, her history, Elise's promise, my choice. When I finished, the kitchen was very quiet. She's been in the house this whole time, he said. Whilst we sleep, in our bedroom, standing over us, and you've been feeding her, meeting with her for weeks, without telling me, yes. He leaned forward. Maya, this is a crime. We have an obligation to report. She is an undocumented person living in a residential structure. There's an active police investigation. If they find out we knew, if we call the police, she'll disappear. Theo, into the woods, into the cold. She doesn't know how to live outside. She doesn't know what a car is. She's never bought food or opened a door or talked to a stranger. She'll die. That is not our responsibility. She lives in our house. She's lived in this house longer than we've been together. How is she not our responsibility? Because we bought a house. Maya, we didn't sign up for this. We didn't create this situation. Elise created it. And Elise is dead, and we don't owe her ghost anything. He was right, legally, practically, rationally. He was right. We didn't create Lark's captivity. We didn't build the walls or the passages or the cage. We owed nothing. But I had sat on the kitchen floor and held her hand while she slept, and something had transferred in that contact that I couldn't undo with logic. She needs professional help, Theo said. A residential facility. People trained in severe attachment disorders. Not, he gestured at the kitchen, at the two-place settings, at the cereal bowl, at the dimmed lights and the lowered thermostat and the blackout curtains I'd added to the kitchen window last week because Lark was starting to eat breakfast in the early light and I wanted to control how much sun reached her. Not this. I followed his gesture. I saw what he saw. The cereal bowl. The two-place settings. I'd been setting Lark a place at every meal, even when she wasn't there. The way you set a place for a family member. The blackout curtains, the dimmed lights, the white noise machine humming upstairs, and on the kitchen door, the interior door between the kitchen and the living room, a lock, a keyed deadbolt installed on the outside. I had installed it last Tuesday. I'd driven to the hardware store and bought a deadbolt and a drill bit, and I'd installed it myself, and I told myself it was so I could secure the kitchen while Lark ate. So she'd know the space was safe, so no one would walk in and startle her a lock. On the outside of the door, the vertigo was physical. A lurch in my stomach, a ringing in my ears. I saw the kitchen, really saw it as if from above, as if I were looking at a photograph of someone else's house. The dimmed lights, the sealed windows, the locks, the place settings. The careful, patient, systematic conversion of a living space into a containment unit for a person who could not survive in the world. Elise's kitchen had looked like this. Elise's whole house had looked like this, and Elise had told herself the same thing I was telling myself. I'm keeping her safe. I'm doing what she needs. I'm being kind. For 31 years while a human being grew up inside the walls. Theo called social services the next morning. I didn't stop him. I wanted to. The want was so strong it was muscular. My hand reached for the phone. My mouth opened to say wait. My whole body leaned toward the act of preventing the call. But I looked at the lock on the kitchen door, the one I'd installed with my own hands, and I let him dial. The intake team came with a psychologist named Dr. Sana Amadi. who specialized in severe institutional attachment. It took 4 days to coax Lark out. I was the one who did it. I sat on the kitchen floor and hummed the melody, and Lark came to me the way she always came. Cautious, liquid, silent, and she held my hand while Dr. Ahmadi spoke to her from the hallway in a low, steady voice. Lark didn't resist. She didn't scream or run. She held my hand and looked at me with those dark eyes, and her expression was not betrayal. It was confirmation, as if she had always known this was how the story ended. Because Elise had told her, and Elise had been right about everything else. They sedated her for transport. The last thing she did before the drug pulled her under was squeeze my hand hard, harder than I thought her thin fingers could manage, and hum 2 notes of the melody, the first 2 rising. They took her to a residential facility in Westerville. I was allowed supervised visits once a week. The first 3 visits, she sat in the corner of the visiting room and wouldn't look at me. The 4th visit, she hummed. The 5th, she held my hand through the gap between the table and the privacy screen. The 8th, she said a word, one word aloud in a voice I'd never heard. Rough and unused, like a machine starting after years of stillness. Maya. My name. Her first spoken word in 28 years of life. Theo and I separated 2 months later, quietly, without cruelty. With the slow, sad efficiency of 2 people who have discovered that the thing they were building together has a crack in the foundation that goes all the way down. He couldn't live in the house. He couldn't live with the version of me the house had produced. I couldn't blame him for that. I'd looked in the mirror and seen Elise's face looking back, and I'd understood that the woman Theo married was still in there but was no longer the one driving. I bought out his share of the mortgage with a second loan that made the first loan look like pocket change. I stayed. Lark is learning slowly with setbacks that would break a less impossibly stubborn mind. She can sit in a room with windows. She can eat at a table with other people. Most days she's reading at an 8th grade level. The biology textbooks Elise left in the passages gave her a foundation that the facility's tutors say is remarkable. She has a therapist she trusts, a room with a nightlight, a routine. She might come home someday. Dr. Ahmadi says it's possible, not to the walls, to the rooms. I removed the extra locks from every door in the house. I took down the blackout curtains. I filled the passages with spray foam insulation, every gap and channel and shaft, and sealed them behind new drywall. The yellow room is my home office now. I painted over the yellow with a blue-gray that I chose from a fan deck at the hardware store, a normal color chosen for normal reasons. The growth chart is still on the inside of the closet door because I tried to paint over it and my hand wouldn't do it. 27 years of someone being measured and recorded and known. Some evidence shouldn't be erased just because it's evidence of something terrible. The house is quiet. It's been quiet for 5 months. I work at my desk in the blue-gray room, and I take on clients and I visit Lark on Saturdays. And I'm learning slowly to live in this house as a house and not as a machine for containing someone who can't survive the world. But sometimes at night, when the furnace clicks off and the refrigerator cycles down and the house settles into its deepest silence, I hear it. The melody. Lark's melody, Elise's melody, 4 notes, rising and falling. It comes from somewhere I can't locate. The walls, the floor, the space between the joists. It's faint enough that I can dismiss it as wind in the eaves, as pipes cooling, as the auditory pareidolia of a brain that spent too many nights on a kitchen floor listening for footsteps. I turn on music. I call a friend. I fill the silence with something human. Last Tuesday, I came home from visiting Lark and found something on the kitchen counter, placed at the exact spot where I used to leave food, where Lark used to leave her notes. A piece of paper, torn from a book I don't recognize. A book that was not in this house when I left that morning. The illustration shows a woman standing at a window, looking out at an empty street. On the margin, in handwriting that is not Lark's clumsy block print and not Elise's careful cursive, but something else entirely. Fluid, confident, old. Someone has written, "Thank you for taking care of her. She was the last one who needed help. Now the house can take care of you." I checked every room, every closet, the sealed walls, the foam-filled passages, the attic, the basement, the crawl space under the porch. Nothing was disturbed. No one was there. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. The thermostat reads 64 degrees. I did not set it to 64 degrees. The white noise machine in the blue-gray room is humming softly. I unplugged that machine 3 months ago. I put it in a box in the garage. It is in the box in the garage, I just checked. But the sound is coming from the wall, where it used to be hardwired, from the wires Elise installed, from a circuit that should be dead. And the kitchen door, the one between the kitchen and the living room. The door I removed the deadbolt from 5 months ago. The door I spackled and sanded and painted to cover the hole, has a lock on it again. A keyed deadbolt, new brass, installed with screws I didn't buy on a door. I secured myself on the inside. This time I just tried the handle. It doesn't turn. The deadbolt is engaged. I didn't lock it. I don't have the key. The melody is louder now, not from the walls, from everywhere, from the house itself, as if the joists and studs and drywall are resonating at a frequency tuned precisely to the shape of this kitchen, this chair, this woman sitting alone at a table set for one. It isn't frightening, that's the worst part. It's the most comforting sound I've ever heard. It makes the kitchen feel warm, safe, complete. It makes me feel like I could sit here forever and never need anything else. No clients, no friends, no Saturday visits, just this room and this sound and this perfect, total stillness. The lock is on the inside. It's keeping the world out. That's all. It's keeping me safe. The way Elise kept Lark safe, the way I kept Lark safe. This house takes care of its people. That's what the note said. That's what the melody is saying, in its 4 rising and falling notes over and over, each repetition settling deeper into my chest. I should get up. I should break the window. I should call someone. The melody goes up. The melody comes down. I think I'll stay a little longer.